Welcome back. You're watching our special coverage here on CNBC TV 18 as we cover Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Trump. We're outside the White House here and in conversation with Peter Maybarduk, Director Access to Medicines and Knowledge Economy at Public Citizen. There's been a lot of chatter around the leaked executive order dealing with pharma pricing and whether this means good news for affordable and accessible health care or bad news for generic companies based in India. Let's find out. Peter, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. What do you make of the executive order, the leaked executive order on pharma pricing?
Well, the leaked order shows that the Trump administration has been captured by Big Pharma. Candidate and President Trump have both promised Americans that they would bring down drug prices. You know, we have quite the crisis here. Americans also are rationing their own access to treatment due to high pharmaceutical prices. And the order shows that the Trump administration intends to lay the blame for high drug prices, not at the feet of the manufacturers, but rather on other countries where prices are slightly lower than in the United States. Of course, people around the world are suffering for lack of access to medicines, and prices are too high everywhere. Pushing other countries to raise their prices isn't going to help Americans with high drug costs here. So we think it's a terrible mistake, but it is one that could be a subject of the meeting on Monday. We do expect to see the United States continue to pressure India to change its policies to favor the big drug companies here.
So what does this mean then if you're saying that the U.S. is going to try and put pressure on India, specifically when it comes to generics? What does it mean for Indian generic companies?
Well, I think that there's a good chance to resist. The danger is that if the Modi government changes its position and agrees to what the Trump administration wants, then you could see reduced business for Indian generic suppliers, but more importantly, from our perspective, reduced access to those affordable medicines that India produces for the world's population. Okay,
explain to us, because President Trump has been talking about bringing down prices and making drugs more affordable. Now, I've just been looking at MSF and what MSF says on the leaked draft executive order. It's in fact said that Prime Minister Modi should not succumb to pressure and not allow the U.S. to seek more concessions, extend the patent term beyond 20 years or lower the standards for grants of patents. What are the specific areas of concern that you have?
Well, the United States government has a long-standing policy of trying to augment these patent rules and try and get India to play by the same standards that operate in the United States. But it's Big Pharma lobbying money that's changed the policies in the United States, not rational argument. So the concerns that we have are that the supply of affordable generic medicines that flows out of India to much of the rest of the world, particularly people in developing countries, could be choked off by aggressive policy from the United States if PM Modi agrees to what the Trump administration wants. So we think that would be a terrible mistake for humanitarian interests the world over. But moreover, President Trump has indicated that he wants to bring down prices, but we've seen in this and many other areas where the populist promises of the president give way to the corporate cabinet that he's incorporated. Many of the high-ranking officials in the Trump administration have strong ties to major corporations and favor corporate interests. And this could be one more area where rather than challenging the drug companies to bring down prices in ways that would be meaningful for people that live here, instead the administration will blame foreign countries and try and put pressure to raise drug prices everywhere in some false expectation that that will have an effect of lowering prices here. So there's no reason to think that it will.
You know, speaking of expectations, the U.S. is also raising concerns, or at least specifically, you know, within the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, you've got the GIPC raising concerns on India's IPR laws. And again, there's contradiction because under the Obama administration, the view was that there was actual convergence on the issue of IPR. So how do you actually see this playing out, specifically in the context of pharma?
Well, we think that India should stay strong and not give in to this sort of pressure. It's important to recognize that the fact that the order leaked gives all of us a chance to show that the Trump administration is going the wrong way on this issue. And while they'll try and lay this blame, I don't think that many Americans are really going to fall for it. If you look at the polling in the United States, Americans badly want to see change in prescription drug pricing, and they understand that it's primarily the pharmaceutical industry's fault. and they want to see some pressure applied to the industry. So this effort to divert blame on everyone but the pharmaceutical manufacturers, we don't think is going to be successful. There are, of course, many interest groups, some of them located right behind us here at the Chamber of Commerce, influenced by Big Pharma, that are trying to apply that pressure. But I think many thoughtful people recognize that it's a scare tactic, that it won't have the effect that the administration claims.
So when the leaked executive order says that a review may include provisions to promote greater IP protection and competition in the global market, how concerned do you feel when you hear that?
Well, I'm concerned because the U.S. government has the power to do great harm. The leaked executive order suggests that several major U.S. government ministries, effectively, are ministries of commerce and health, along with the U.S. Trade Representative's office, would join forces to have a systemic review of international drug purchasing and price systems globally, as well as the intellectual property regimens. If they get quite serious about that, we could see a hearkening back to the dark days of 15 and 20 years ago when millions of people were dying of AIDS due to lack of access to existing medicines. So that's what we want to avoid. That was a period of history that gave the United States a bad name internationally. And we think that we can do much better, be a force for good in the world, and it would hate to see the administration go in that direction.
So for the benefit of our viewers who are watching, and I go back again to the leaked executive order, it says review must include price differentials between foreign governments and the U.S., multilateral and bilateral trade agreements. The review must also ensure that American citizens do not disproportionately subsidize medical product innovations for the rest of the world or allow foreign governments to unfairly devalue American innovation. So this is what you were talking about, that they're trying to lay the blame on everybody else.
There's this concept that some people have that Americans are subsidizing research and development costs globally. But in fact, the pharmaceutical companies are making far more than their research and development costs back in the U.S. market alone, let alone the rest of the world, close to twice their R&D costs. Prices are not derived from R&D costs. They're profit-maximizing companies that are getting as much money as they can out of every country in the world. And in the United States, we have very strong monopoly powers for the corporations, and we don't even reserve for the public the right, for the most part, to sit and negotiate with the monopolists to bring prices down. So our prices are so high because we let them do it to us. We let the corporations do it to us. In other parts of the world, some governments have slightly tougher policies that bring medicines down somewhat. But everywhere, they're more expensive than they need to be. There are more efficient ways to pay for research and development than handing out monopolies to the companies that are selling the drugs. So the solution is not raising prices elsewhere. It's bringing prices down everywhere through a system that holds the corporations more accountable and looks for investments in R&D that are more closely tailored to health needs.
Well, what's your own take on whether the issue of price caps that the Indian government has imposed, for instance, on stents, whether that's going to be taken up at all as part of this meeting? I know that the multinational medical manufacturers do want this issue to be taken up, and they feel that price caps are wrong and they're unfair. But do you believe that this is likely to be featured at all as part of the conversations here? Would you like this to be taken up and India not to succumb to pressure even on this issue?
Well, I think both countries are better off if they leave this issue alone. I don't think they're likely to get to that level of detail between the president and the prime minister. But perhaps some of their subordinates will get into some of those details. I think it's a destructive line of reasoning. I don't think it's good for the people of India. I don't think it's good for the people of the United States or people around the world. We think the most effective way of bringing down prices is through competition, through generic competition where possible. So price caps, depending on how they're implemented, can be effective. But really, so we're looking for more robust competition policies, and India plays an important role in that regard globally that we'd hate to see go away because many people's lives are at stake. So finally, what would your expectation be? I don't know whether the executive order in any meaningful way is going to be taken up as part of this meeting because it's meant to be a sort of meet and greet and exploratory one, but maybe, at an official level it will be taken up. But, what would your expectation realistically be from this particular visit? Well, the leaked order, because it's a draft, they're not looking at it as an official document yet, but President Trump has been rather clear in his view on this subject. And it's been consistently a part of U.S. government policy for the past 10, 20 years, maybe longer, to lean on India in this regard. And we think that's inappropriate, but I would expect it, I think it's reasonably likely to come up. Clearly, it's not so important as the various security and diplomatic interests that the countries have. It's really an issue that we take up only because of the lobbying power of the pharmaceutical corporations in the United States. And I think we would get much more out of the bilateral relationship if we leave this issue alone and let India continue to produce the world's affordable supply of medicine.
Well, Peter, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Appreciate your thoughts. And, well, once we do have the official executive order, we'll hopefully check back in with you for your comments then as well. But for now, thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18.
Thank you.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up the CNBC TV 18 special from all of us here from outside the White House. Goodbye, and many thanks for watching.